me, I can't take it.
I'm sorry, baby.
Siyama's hands trembled as she stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite. The white silk gown hugged her light brown skin, making her look like something between a dream and a sacrifice. She was 20 years old, and in 3 hours, she would become Mrs. Kimin Choi. Her mother had died 2 years ago, leaving behind medical debts that could drown a small village. Her father worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep their heads above water. Then Kimin appeared, like salvation wrapped in expensive cologne and dangerous promises. He paid everything, every single bill. He asked for nothing in return except one thing, her hand in marriage. "You don't have to do this," her younger sister Amara had whispered the night before. But Siyama knew better. Their father's eyes had finally stopped carrying that haunted look. Her siblings were back in school. Kimin had given them all a second chance at life. The wedding was small, intimate. Kimin didn't have family present, just business associates who watched everything with calculating eyes. He was 50 years old, but he carried himself with the dangerous grace of a man half his age. His hair was jet black with distinguished silver at the temples, his face all sharp angles and knowing smiles. People whispered that he controlled half the underground operations in Seoul, that his hands were stained with blood, but those same hands had held hers with surprising gentleness when he proposed. "Are you certain?" he had asked her that day, his Korean accent thick but his English clear. "Marriage to me is not simple. My life is not simple." She had said yes anyway. What choice did she have? The reception passed in a blur of faces she didn't know and food she couldn't taste. Kimin stayed by her side the entire time, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back, a possessive but not aggressive gesture. When he introduced her to people, he called her "my wife," with something that sounded almost like pride. As the night drew to a close, Siyama felt her stomach twist into knots. The penthouse Kimin owned overlooked the Han River, all glass and steel and cold luxury. Their bedroom was vast, decorated in blacks and grays with touches of gold. It looked like a room designed by someone who understood elegance but not warmth. Kimin poured them both wine. His movements were measured, controlled. Everything about him was controlled. "You are frightened," he observed, handing her a glass. "I'm fine," Siyama lied. He smiled, a sad sort of smile that made him look his age for the first time that day. "I have been many things in my life, Siyama. A good man is not one of them, but I will try to be a good husband to you." Something in his voice made her believe him. She took a sip of wine, then another. Dutch courage, her mother used to call it. When he finally kissed her, it was softer than she expected. His lips were warm, his hands careful as they traced the zipper of her dress. But as the intimacy progressed, as clothing fell away and skin met skin, Siyama realized something was very wrong. She gasped, then pulled back. "Wait, I can't." Kimin froze. "What is wrong?" It's..." She struggled to find words that wouldn't sound insulting. "You're too big, I can't. That's not going to work." For a moment, Kimin's face went completely blank. Then, to her surprise, he laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but something bitter and resigned. "Ah," he said, reaching for his discarded shirt. "I should have told you." "Told me what?" He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking tired. "I have a condition, genetic. My father had it, his father before him. It causes excessive growth in certain areas. It has been a complication in my life." Siyama wrapped herself in the sheet, her mind racing. "And you didn't think to mention this before we got married?" "Would you have believed me? Would you not have thought I was boasting or lying?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Most women I have been with could not. It always ended badly. That is part of why I have never married before." "Then why marry me?" Siyama demanded. Kimin turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. "Because when I saw you at that hospital, visiting your mother, holding her hand and reading to her even though she could not hear you anymore, I thought, here is someone who understands loyalty, devotion. I did not marry you for sex, Siyama. I married you because I am tired of being alone." The confession hung in the air between them. Siyama didn't know what to say. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding night going. "So what now?" she finally asked. Kimin stood, began dressing. "Now, we figure out how to make this marriage work despite its limitations. You married me for your family's security. I married you for companionship. Perhaps that is enough." But the look in his eyes said he knew it wasn't. The next 3 weeks were strange. They lived together like cordial roommates. Kimin went to work early, came home late. When he was home, he was kind to her, attentive even. He asked about her day, encouraged her to pursue the art degree she'd abandoned when her mother got sick. He set up a studio for her in one of the spare rooms, filled with supplies she'd never dreamed of affording. "You have talent," he told her one evening studying her paintings. "You should not waste it." She wanted to hate him. It would be easier if she could. But Kimin was nothing like she expected. He was thoughtful, intelligent, surprisingly funny when he let his guard down. And he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious, something he was afraid of breaking. One night, he came home with blood on his collar. Siyama was in the kitchen, attempting to cook Korean food with the help of YouTube videos. She froze when she saw him. "It is not mine," he said simply, moving past her toward the bedroom. She should have been horrified. Instead, she found herself following him, watching as he stripped off the ruined shirt with mechanical efficiency. "Does it bother you?" he asked, not turning around. "Knowing what I do." "I knew what you were when I married you," Siyama said. Knowing and seeing are different things. She stepped closer, surprised by her own boldness. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then I'll heat dinner." Something shifted in Kimin's expression. He caught her wrist gently as she turned to leave. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not looking at me with fear, for not asking questions you do not want answers to, for being here when I come home." His thumb traced circles on her pulse point. "I know this is not the marriage you wanted, but I am grateful for it nonetheless." Siyama felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. This was dangerous. She was starting to care about him, starting to feel things she had no right to feel for a man who married her out of loneliness and convenience. Before she could respond, Kimin released her and stepped back. "I have been thinking about our situation, our marital problem." She felt her face heat. "Kimin." "Let me finish." He sat on the bed, his expression serious. "I do not want you to live your life without physical affection, without love. You are young, Siyama. You deserve those things." "What are you saying?" "My brother's son, Jim, is arriving from Busan next week. He is 27, handsome, successful. He runs the legitimate side of our business empire, and he is looking for a wife." Siyama stared at him. Are you seriously suggesting I have an affair with your nephew?" "Not an affair, a relationship, with my blessing." Kimin's voice was calm, measured. "You would remain my wife in name for business and social purposes, but Jim could give you what I cannot. Companionship, romance, a normal life." "That's insane." "Perhaps, but I would rather you find happiness with someone I trust than grow to resent me. Jim is a good man, better than me. You could do worse." Siyama's mind reeled. What kind of man offered his wife to his nephew? What kind of marriage was this? But even as she opened her mouth to refuse, to tell him how insane his proposal was, a small part of her wondered. What if he was right? What if this was her chance at something real? "Think about it," Kimin said, standing. "That is all I ask." He left her alone with her thoughts, and the growing realization that she had married the strangest, most complicated man in all of Seoul. And despite everything, she was starting to fall for him. Jim arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, driving a sleek black car that whispered money without shouting it. Siyama watched from the penthouse window as he emerged, tall and lean in a fitted navy suit. Even from 15 stories up, she could see he moved differently than Kimin, less like a predator, more like someone who'd never had to fight for anything. She'd spent the past week trying to convince herself this arrangement was absurd. She'd rehearsed a dozen ways to tell Kimin she wouldn't participate in his strange plan. But when he'd mentioned it again over breakfast that morning, she'd only nodded silently, hatting herself for her curiosity. "He doesn't know," Kimin had said, reading her thoughts as he sometimes did. About our arrangement, about what I'm proposing. To him, you are simply my wife, and he is here on business. What happens next is up to you. Now, as the elevator chimed and voices filled the entryway, Siyama smoothed down her yellow sundress and tried to steady her breathing. Jim was beautiful. That was the first thought that struck her when he walked into the living room. Where Kimin was all dangerous edges and contained violence, Jim had an easy grace, a warmth in his smile that reached his eyes. His hair was styled casually, his face open and friendly. "Uncle," he said, embracing Kimin with genuine affection. Then he turned to Siyama, and his eyes widened slightly. "And you must be Aunt Siyama. Uncle Kimin didn't mention how beautiful you were." "Don't flirt with my wife, nephew," Kimin said, but there was amusement in his voice. "I'm simply stating facts," Jim replied, his English perfect, barely accented. He took Siyama's hand and bowed slightly. "It's an honor to finally meet you. Uncle has been very mysterious about his sudden marriage." "There's not much to tell," Siyama managed, too aware of Kimin's eyes on her. "We met, we married, simple." "Nothing about Uncle Kimin is ever simple," Jim said with a knowing grin. The three of them had dinner together that night. Jim told stories about growing up with Kimin as a distant but fascinating uncle, the man who would appear with expensive gifts and dangerous advice. He talked about his business ventures, his struggles to keep the family's legitimate enterprises separate from the darker elements. "I keep telling Uncle to retire, let me handle everything," Jim said, pouring more wine. "He's made enough enemies, enough money. He should be enjoying life, not looking over his shoulder." "Retirement is death for men like me," Kimin replied. "The moment I stop moving, someone will put a bullet in my head." "That's exactly my point," Jim said, his expression turning serious. "You're not invincible, Uncle. One day your luck will run out." Something passed between them, heavy with unspoken history. Siyama realized this was an old argument, one that wouldn't be resolved tonight or possibly ever. After dinner, Kimin excused himself for a business call. Jim helped Siyama clear the dishes, insisting despite her protests. "He seems different," Jim said as they worked side by side in the kitchen. "Calmer, maybe, less sharp around the edges. I think you're good for him." "I don't know about that," Siyama said. "I do. Uncle Kimin has always been alone, even in a crowded room. But the way he looks at you—" Jim paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's like he's finally found something worth protecting besides his empire." Siyama's throat tightened. She wanted to tell Jim the truth, that his uncle looked at her that way because she was the closest thing to normal he'd ever allowed himself, that their marriage was built on financial necessity and mutual loneliness, not love. But before she could speak, Jim continued. "I envy him, actually. I've been looking for someone like you for years, someone real, someone who doesn't just see the money or the name, someone who looks at you like you're a person, not a prize." "I'm sure you have plenty of options," Siyama said, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Options, yes. Connection, no." Jim dried the last plate, then turned to face her fully. "Can I be honest with you, Aunt Siyama?" "Please, just Siyama. The aunt thing makes me feel ancient." He laughed. "All right, Siyama, honest truth. When Uncle told me he'd gotten married, I was shocked. When he said you were 20, I was worried. I thought he'd done something typically reckless, married someone inappropriate. But now that I've met you, I understand. You're not what I expected at all." "What did you expect?" "Someone frivolous, someone young and silly who wanted his money. Instead, you're—" He gestured vaguely. "You're an actual person, with depth. It's refreshing." Siyama felt herself warming to him despite her better judgment. Jim was easy to talk to, easy to be around. He didn't carry Kimin's weight, that sense of barely contained danger. With Jim, she could almost imagine a normal life. Over the next 2 weeks, Jim became a fixture in their home. He worked from Kimin's study during the day, joined them for meals, sometimes stayed late into the evening discussing business and politics and art. He was fascinated by Siyama's paintings, spent hours in her studio asking questions about technique and inspiration. "You have a gift," he told her one afternoon, studying a canvas she'd just finished. A chaotic swirl of colors that somehow resolved into a woman's face, half in shadow. This is haunting, beautiful and sad at the same time. That's how I felt when I painted it, Siyama admitted. Are you sad often? The question was gentle but direct. Siyama set down her brush. Sometimes, this isn't the life I imagined for myself. What life did you imagine? I don't know, something simpler. College, maybe falling in love with someone my own age, figuring out who I was supposed to be. Instead, I'm married to a man I barely know, living in a world I don't understand. Jim was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Uncle Kimin can be difficult to know, but he's not a bad man despite what he does. He has his own code, his own sense of honor. I know, Siyama said, and she meant it. She was learning Kimin's rhythms, his hidden kindnesses. The way he left her favorite tea by her easel in the mornings. How he never raised his voice, even when he came home bloodied and exhausted. The careful distance he maintained, respecting the boundaries of their strange arrangement. But you deserve more than just respect and distance, Jim said softly. You deserve passion, romance, someone who can give you everything. Their eyes met, and Siyama felt her pulse quicken. This was it, the moment Kimin had orchestrated. The moment she was supposed to fall into Jim's arms and accept the consolation prize of her loveless marriage. Instead, she stepped back. I should clean up. Kimin will be home soon. Siyama. Please, Jim, don't. But the words were already out there. Hanging between them, like a promise neither of them had asked for. That night, Kimin called her into his office. He looked tired, older than his 50 years. There was a fresh bruise on his jaw he hadn't bothered to hide. What happened? Siyama asked, moving toward him instinctively. Business disagreement, nothing serious. He caught her hand before she could touch his face. I wanted to talk to you about Jim. Siyama's stomach dropped. Kimin. He is falling for you. I can see it. And I think perhaps you are falling for him too. That's not, I don't. She pulled her hand free, frustrated. This is insane. You can't just decide I should have feelings for someone. I am not deciding anything. I am simply observing. Kimin's voice was maddeningly calm. Jim is good for you. He makes you smile. You are lighter when he is around. And what about you? Siyama demanded. What about what I feel for you? The words escaped before she could stop them. Kimin's expression flickered, surprise, then something that might have been pain. You do not feel anything for me, he said quietly. You are grateful, perhaps. You feel obligation, but that is not love, Siyama. How do you know what I feel? Because I know what love looks like, and I know I do not deserve it, especially not from you. He stood, moved to the window overlooking the city. Jim can give you a real marriage. Children if you want them, a life without violence, without fear. I cannot give you any of those things. I didn't ask for those things. But you should have them anyway. He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd known him, Kimin looked truly vulnerable. Let him love you, Siyama. Let yourself love him. I will not stand in your way. I will be grateful just to have you near, even if it is as Jim's woman and only my wife in name. Siyama felt tears burning her eyes. You're an idiot. Perhaps, but I am an idiot who wants you to be happy. She left before he could see her cry, fled to her studio and stood among her paintings, trying to make sense of the tangle in her chest. She was furious with Kimin for being so noble, so self-sacrificing. Furious with herself for caring about a man who thought so little of his own worth that he'd give her away rather than fight for her. And underneath it all, she was terrified because Jim was perfect, kind, age-appropriate, uncomplicated, everything she should want. So why did her heart keep pulling her back to the dangerous, impossible man who'd married her out of loneliness and was now trying to set her free? The next day, Jim asked her to go to dinner with him, just the two of them. Uncle has business anyway, he said, and I'd like to spend time with you, really talk without him hovering. Siyama knew she should refuse. This was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But Kimin had already given his blessing, had practically pushed her toward this. So she said yes. The restaurant Jim chose was intimate, romantic. Candles flickered on white tablecloths, soft music played in the background. He was the perfect gentleman, attentive, funny, genuinely interested in everything she said. "Tell me about before," he said over dessert. "Before Uncle Kimin, before all of this, who were you?" So she told him about her mother's illness, her father's desperation, her own abandoned dreams. She told him about feeling lost and scared and trapped by circumstances beyond her control. "And then Kimin appeared," Jim said, "like a very complicated fairy godfather." Siyama laughed despite herself, something like that. "Do you regret it, marrying him?" She considered the question seriously. "No, he saved my family, and he's been kinder than I expected, more human." "But you're not in love with him." It wasn't a question. Siyama looked down at her plate, unable to answer. Jim reached across the table, took her hand. "You don't have to be. That's not why he married you. But Siyama, you deserve to be loved, really loved. And I think I could." "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't say it." "Why not?" "Because once you say it, everything changes." "Maybe everything should change." He leaned forward, and Siyama knew he was going to kiss her. Knew she should pull away, should stop this before it started. But she didn't. His lips were soft, uncertain, nothing like Kimin's possessive claiming. This was a question, not a demand. And against all logic, against everything she thought she knew about herself, Siyama found herself answering. When they pulled apart, Jim was smiling. "Come away with me, just for a weekend. Let me show you what we could have together." "Jim, I'm married to your uncle." "Who wants you to be happy, who practically begged me to pursue you." Jim's grip on her hand tightened. "Give us a chance, Siyama, that's all I'm asking." She should have said no. Should have run back to the penthouse and told Kimin this whole plan was insane. Instead, she heard herself say, "Okay, one weekend." Jim's face lit up like she'd given him the world. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the Han River, Kimin sat alone in the dark, wondering if doing the right thing was supposed to hurt this much. They left on Friday morning. Jim had booked a seaside house in Busan, 3 hours south of Seoul. Siyama packed a small bag while Kimin watched from the doorway of their bedroom, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," she said, folding a dress with more force than necessary. "You can tell me to stay, you can tell Jim to back off." "I could," Kimin agreed, "but I will not." "Why?" She turned to face him, desperate for something, anger, jealousy, anything that would make sense of this situation. "Why are you letting this happen?" Kimin stepped into the room, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat of his body. "Because I am 50 years old, Siyama. I have killed men. I have built an empire on blood and fear, but I have never learned how to love someone without destroying them." His hand came up, traced her cheek with surprising gentleness. "You are the first pure thing in my life. I will not ruin you by keeping you locked in a marriage that cannot give you what you need." "And if what I need is you?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Kimin's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her, might finally claim her the way a husband should. Instead, he stepped back. "Then you need to discover that is not true. Go with Jim. Let him court you properly. Let yourself imagine a different future. And if, at the end of this weekend, you still believe you want this broken old man, then we will talk." Before Siyama could respond, the intercom buzzed. Jim, waiting downstairs. Kimin picked up her bag, handed it to her. "Be happy, Siyama. That is all I ask." The drive to Busan was beautiful. Jim played music, told stories, made her laugh. He was so easy to be with, so uncomplicated. When he reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together, it felt natural. Right. So why did her chest ache, with every mile that stretched between her and Seoul? The house Jim had rented sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was all wood and glass, open spaces filled with light. Nothing like Kimin's dark, controlled penthouse. "What do you think?" Jim asked, carrying their bags inside. "It's beautiful," Siyama said honestly. And it was. It was also exactly the kind of place she'd dreamed about as a girl, romantic, peaceful, normal. They spent the afternoon walking on the beach, Jim's arm around her shoulders. He bought her ice cream from a vendor, wiped a drop from her chin with his thumb. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he pulled her close. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I can't help it. You're all I think about." Siyama's heart hammered. "Jim, I know you're married to Uncle Kimin. I know that's a reality we have to navigate, but he's given us his blessing. He wants this for you, for us." Jim's hands cupped her face. "Let me love you, Siyama. Let me give you the life you deserve." When he kissed her this time, it was deeper, more insistent. His hands slid into her hair, pulled her closer. And Siyama let herself fall into it, let herself imagine this was her life. Beach walks and gentle kisses and a man who loved her without shadows. But that night, lying in bed beside Jim in the beach house, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below, all she could think about was Kimin. The way he looked at her like she was something precious and forbidden. The careful distance he maintained, the thoughtful gifts, the quiet moments when she caught him watching her paint with something like wonder on his face. Jim was perfect, but perfection wasn't what her heart wanted. She slipped out of bed at 3 a.m, stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to pick it up. Kimin answered on the second ring. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough with sleep and concern. "I don't know," Siyama whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I want." "That is why you are there, to figure it out." "What if I can't? What if there's no right answer?" Kimin was quiet for a long moment. "Then you choose the answer that lets you sleep at night, the one that does not make you call strange men at 3 a.m. Despite everything, she smiled. "You're not strange, you're my husband." "In name only." "Maybe that's enough. Maybe—" She stopped, hearing movement behind her. Jim, standing in the doorway, his expression confused and hurt. "I have to go," she said quickly, ending the call. "Was that Uncle Kimin?" Jim asked. "I couldn't sleep. I just wanted to check in." At 3 a.m, Jim's voice was flat. "Siyama, what are we doing here? What is this?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm trying to figure it out." "Do you love him?" The question hung in the salt air between them. Siyama wanted to say no, wanted to make this easier for both of them, but she was so tired of lying. "I think I might," she whispered. "I think I might love someone I barely know, who's twice my age, who paid for me like I was a transaction. And I hate myself for it because you're here, and you're perfect, and you're everything I should want." Jim's face crumpled. "But I'm not what you do want." "I don't know what I want," Siyama's voice broke. "That's the problem. With you, I can imagine a normal life. Marriage, kids, growing old together, it's safe, it's good. But with Kimin, it's dangerous, exciting, the forbidden thing you can't have." Jim laughed bitterly. "I should have known. Uncle Kimin always gets what he wants, even when he's pretending he doesn't want it." "That's not fair." "Isn't it? He set this whole thing up, pushed us together, and now you're more in love with him than ever because he was noble enough to let you go." Jim shook his head. "He's a genius, or I'm an idiot, probably both." "Jim, I'm sorry." "Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't apologize. You've been honest, which is more than I can say for myself. I knew you weren't ready. I knew this was too fast. But I wanted you so badly I convinced myself it could work." They drove back to Seoul the next morning in heavy silence. When they reached the penthouse, Jim didn't come up. He just handed Siyama her bag and said, "Tell Uncle Kimin he won, as always." Siyama found Kimin in his office, staring at a map on his computer screen. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted. "You are back early," he observed. "It didn't work out." "I see," Kimin's voice was carefully neutral. "Did Jim?" Jim was perfect, absolutely perfect. Kind, romantic, everything a woman could want. Siyama dropped her bag, moved to stand in front of his desk. "Which is why I need you to tell me why I spent the entire weekend thinking about you. Why I called you at 3 a.m. instead of letting his arms be enough. Why I'm standing here, now instead of running away from this insane situation. Kimin stood slowly, like a man approaching something that might bolt. Siyama. No, you don't get to deflect. You don't get to be noble and self-sacrificing. I want the truth. Why did you really marry me? And don't give me that line about being tired of being alone. That is the truth. It's not the whole truth. Kimin's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just looked at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, the instinct to protect himself warring with something else. Finally, he spoke. I saw you at that hospital every day for 3 months. I was there visiting one of my men, and you were there with your mother. You read to her, sang to her, held her hand even when she no longer knew who you were. And I thought, this is what devotion looks like. This is what love looks like. He moved around the desk, closer to her. I have spent my entire life with people who feared me or wanted something from me. But you, Siyama, you did not even know I existed. You were so focused on loving your mother, on being present for her final days. And I wanted that. Not the love itself, but to be near someone capable of it. To learn what it felt like to matter to someone, even if it was only because I could solve your problems. That's not, Siyama's voice cracked. Kimin, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Yes, I am a sad old man who bought himself a wife because he did not know how else to acquire one. He smiled, bitter and broken. So I married you for companionship, for proximity to goodness. I never expected. He stopped, shook his head. Expected what? To actually fall in love with you. The confession fell between them like a bomb. Siyama's breath caught. I thought I could keep it contained, Kimin continued, his voice low and rough. I thought I could watch you from a distance, be grateful for whatever pieces of your life you were willing to share. And then Jim came, and I saw how you looked at him, how easy it was between you. I realized I could not give you that. I would always be the man in the shadows, the one you felt obligated to. So I tried to give you what I thought you deserved. And broke both our hearts in the process, Siyama whispered. Better mine broken than yours trapped. She moved then, closed the distance between them, placed her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms. You're an idiot. You have mentioned this before. I fell in love with you over breakfast conversations and quiet evenings. I fell in love with the way you leave tea by my easel and never ask questions when you come home bloody. I fell in love with a man who thinks he's a monster but treats me like I'm made of glass and gold. She rose on her toes, bringing their faces close. I fell in love with my husband, Kimin Choi, not because I'm obligated to, but because I couldn't help it. Siyama, his voice was wrecked. I cannot give you a normal life. I cannot promise you safety or stability. My world is violent and dangerous, and people I love tend to end up dead. Then we'll be careful, we'll be smart, but I'm not walking away from this. She pulled his face down to hers. I'm not walking away from you. When their lips finally met, it was nothing like the gentle kisses she'd shared with Jim. This was fire and desperation, years of loneliness and longing poured into a single moment. Kimin's hands tangled in her hair, pulled her closer, like he was afraid she might disappear. We still have the problem, he murmured against her mouth. The physical impossibility. Then we'll figure it out, together, like married people do. Siyama pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. Unless you're going to tell me you married me and fell in love with me but still don't actually want me. Something dark and possessive flashed in Kimin's expression. I have wanted you since the moment I saw you. I have dreamed about you, ached for you, imagined 1,000 ways I could make you mine if my body would cooperate. Then we'll find a way. We have time, we have patience, and we have each other. Kimin kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. You are certain. You are choosing me over Jim, over safety, over everything that makes sense. I'm choosing love over safety. I'm choosing the complicated, dangerous, impossible thing because it's real. She smiled against his lips. Besides, I've already got the complicated, dangerous man. Might as well commit to it. They spent that night talking, really talking for the first time since they'd married. Kimin told her about his childhood, about the violence that shaped him, about the empire he'd built and the ghosts that haunted him. Siyama told him about her fears, her dreams, the person she wanted to become. And when dawn broke over Seoul, they fell asleep together in Kimin's bed. Their bed now, fully clothed, wrapped around each other like they could keep the world at bay through proximity alone. But the world wasn't done with them yet. Siyama woke to her phone buzzing insistently. A text from Jim, "Turn on the news. Uncle needs to see this." She shook Kimin awake. He grabbed his own phone, his expression darkening as he read message after message flooding in. "What is it?" Siyama asked.